Hello, and welcome. Find a comfortable position, close your eyes, and allow your body to relax. Tonight, we're not journeying to the Grand Pyramids or the golden tombs of pharaohs. Instead, we're traveling back to the quiet, everyday world of an ancient Egyptian farmer. A world shaped not by gold, but by the sun, the soil, and the great river Nile. Let your mind drift to the black, fertile earth along the riverbanks. This land was the lifeblood of Egypt, a gift from the annual inundation of the Nile. Each year, from June to September, the river would swell, overflowing its banks and depositing a rich layer of silt. This was a time of waiting for the farmer. With the fields submerged, agricultural work paused. Perhaps our farmer, let's call him Kenan, would spend this time repairing his tools, his wooden plow, his sickles, his winnowing scoops. He might mend fishing nets or help with state-building projects, contributing his labor to construct a temple or a canal, a duty expected of him. It was a rhythm of life dictated by water, a slow, patient time of anticipation. As the waters began to recede in October, the real work started. The land that emerged was dark, damp, and ready for planting. Kenan would guide his oxen, pulling a simple wooden plow that scratched a shallow furrow into the earth. It wasn't deep, just enough to break the surface. Following behind him, perhaps his wife or children would walk, scattering seeds by hand from a reed basket. They would cast grains of emmer, wheat, and barley, the staples of the Egyptian diet, to press the seeds into the soil and protect them from hungry birds. They would drive a herd of sheep or goats across the newly sown field. Imagine the gentle bleating of the animals, the soft thud of their hooves on the damp soil, the quiet murmur of a family working together under the mild autumn sun. The growing season, from October to February, was a period of careful watchfulness. Unlike the flooded lands, fields further from the river needed irrigation. This is where Kenan's ingenuity came into play. He would spend long hours operating a shadoof, a simple but effective water-lifting device. It was a long wooden pole balanced on a pivot, with a weight on one end and a bucket on the other. Kenan would pull the rope to lower the bucket into a canal, then let the counterweight help him lift the heavy, water-filled container. He would then swing the pole around and empty the water into the irrigation ditches that crisscrossed his fields. It was repetitive, muscle-aching work, performed under the steady Egyptian sun. The rhythmic creak of the shadoof, the splash of water, the feeling of cool mud between his toes, these were the sounds and sensations of his world. During this time, Kenan's life was a cycle of watering, weeding, and protecting his crops. He would walk the boundaries of his plot, checking the irrigation channels for blockages, pulling up stubborn weeds, and chasing away birds or pests. His home was likely a simple structure made of mud bricks, with a flat roof where the family might sleep on hot nights. The rooms inside would be small and sparsely furnished reed mats for sleeping, clay pots for storing grain and water, and a small oven for baking bread. Life was simple, centered around the family and the field. When the harvest season arrived in late spring, around March and April, the fields turned a golden brown. This was the busiest time of year. The entire community would mobilize. Kenan, along with his neighbors, would enter the fields with sharp, curved sickles, often made of wood with flint blades set into them. They would work in a line, cutting the stalks of wheat and barley. The work was stooping and tiring, from sunrise to sunset. The cut grain was then gathered into bundles and carried by donkeys to the threshing floor. The threshing floor was a hard, circular patch of earth. Here, the grain stalks were spread out, and oxen were driven to trample over them, their heavy hooves separating the grain heads from the stalks. After threshing came winnowing. On a breezy day, Kenan and his family would use wooden scoops to toss the mixture of grain and chaff into the air. The heavier grain would fall straight back down, while the lighter chaff would be carried away by the wind. It was a dusty, repetitive process, but the growing pile of clean grain was the reward for a year's worth of labor. This grain was everything. It was food for Kenan's family, the source of the bread and beer that formed the core of their diet. But it was also their currency. A portion of the harvest was owed as tax to the state, the temple, or the landowner. Scribes, officials of the pharaoh, would arrive to measure the grain and calculate the tax. Their arrival was a source of anxiety. A good harvest meant having enough to pay the tax and feed the family until the next one. A poor harvest could mean debt and hardship. The meticulous records kept by the scribes on papyrus scrolls determined the fate of families like Kenan's. Beyond the cycle of farming, daily life was filled with small routines. Kenan's wife would grind the grain between two stones to make flour, a laborious daily task. She would bake round, flat loaves of bread and brew a thick, nutritious beer from barley. The family's diet might also include vegetables grown in a small garden, plantains, garlic, lettuce, and beans. Fish from the Nile and poultry were common, while red meat was a luxury reserved for festivals. Social life revolved around the village and religious festivals, celebrating the gods of agriculture and fertility. Life was not just work. There were moments of rest, of community, of stories told in the cool of the evening, of children playing games in the dust. Life was predictable, grounded, and deeply connected to the natural world. It was a life of immense labor, but also of a profound and simple order. And now, as our story of Kenan the farmer comes to a close, let the rhythm of his life guide you deeper into rest. The slow turning of the seasons, the patient waiting for the flood, the repetitive motion of watering the fields, the steady cycle of planting and harvesting. Let these simple, ordinary images quiet your mind. There are no grand dramas here, only the gentle, persistent pulse of life along the Nile, thousands of years ago. Allow this peaceful rhythm to carry you into a deep and restorative sleep. We're journeying back to 1932, to the vast, sun-scorched plains of Western Australia. Our story isn't one of grand empires or clashing armies in the traditional sense. Instead, it's a rather peculiar chapter in military history. A conflict that has become the stuff of legend and internet memes. The Great Emu War. So, get comfortable. Close your eyes if you wish, and let the strange tale of man versus bird carry you into your dreams. After the First World War, many Australian veterans were given land to farm in Western Australia as part of a soldier settlement scheme. Life was tough. These were marginal lands, and the Great Depression had just begun to cast its long shadow across the globe, causing wheat prices to plummet. These new farmers, who had already faced the horrors of war, were now battling economic hardship and the unforgiving Australian environment. As if things weren't difficult enough, they soon found themselves facing an unexpected new enemy. Following their breeding season, a massive migration of emus, estimated to be around 20,000 strong, began to move from the inland regions towards the coast. Emus are large, powerful, and flightless birds, native to Australia. Think of a bird that can stand as tall as a person and run faster than a racehorse. Their migratory path took them right through the newly established wheat farms in the Campion district. For the emus, these farmlands were a paradise. There was an abundant supply of water and endless fields of delicious, ripe wheat. They descended upon the crops with great enthusiasm, eating the grain and trampling everything in their path. The fences the farmers had painstakingly erected to keep out rabbits proved to be no match for the large birds, who simply knocked them down, creating gaps for other pests to follow. The farmers were desperate. Their livelihoods were being destroyed by this feathered invasion. They appealed to the government for help. A delegation of these ex-soldiers traveled to Perth to meet with the Minister of Defence, Sir George Pearce. Given their military background, their proposed solution was, perhaps, predictable. They requested the deployment of machine guns. It was a strange request, but Sir George Pearce was sympathetic. He reasoned that the birds would make for good target practice for the military, and the intervention could be framed as a form of assistance to the struggling veterans. He agreed to deploy a small contingent of soldiers from the Royal Australian Artillery. So, the stage was set for one of history's most unusual military operations. Major GPW Meredith of the 7th Heavy Battery was placed in command. He was accompanied by just 2 soldiers, Sergeant S. McMurray and Gunner J. O'Halloran. Their primary armament consisted of 2 Lewis automatic machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The plan seemed simple enough. They would use the guns to cull the emu population and put an end to the agricultural destruction. The media at the time even sent a cinematographer along, expecting to capture dramatic footage of this unique war. Everyone, it seemed, anticipated a swift and decisive victory for the humans. The emus, however, had other ideas. The first engagement took place on the 2nd of November, 1932. The soldiers spotted a flock of about 50 emus near the town of Campion. They set up their Lewis gun and prepared to open fire. But the emus were far from the easy targets they had imagined. The birds were surprisingly difficult to hit. They were fast, erratic, and had an uncanny ability to scatter the moment the shooting started. The effective range of the machine guns was shorter than the soldiers anticipated, and the birds were often just out of reach. On this first day, after firing hundreds of rounds, they managed to kill only a handful of emus. It was a frustrating and far from glorious start. A few days later, the military men attempted a new tactic. They had received intelligence that a large flock of over 1,000 emus was gathering near a local dam. This time, they would set up an ambush. They concealed themselves and the machine gun. waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the massive flock approached the water, the soldiers opened fire. What happened next was chaos. Instead of falling in neat rows, the emus instantly broke into countless small groups, running in every direction. They were, in the words of one observer, as difficult to hit as Zulus. The gunner blazed away. But the birds were simply too agile, and their movements too unpredictable. One of the guns even jammed after only a few moments. By the end of the day, a huge amount of ammunition had been spent, with only about a dozen confirmed emu casualties. Major Meredith was starting to realize the immense challenge they faced. He noted in his report that the emus seemed to have a kind of military organization of their own. He described how each flock appeared to have a leader, a large black-plumed bird that would stand watch while the others fed. At the first sign of danger, this leader would give a signal, and the entire flock would scatter, making them impossible targets. He even went so far as to compare the emus to tanks, remarking on their incredible resilience. Even when hit with multiple bullets, the birds would often just keep running, seemingly unfazed. The press began to report on the army's lack of success, and the public back in the eastern cities started to find the whole situation rather amusing. The war dragged on. The soldiers tried different strategies. They mounted one of the Lewis guns on a truck, hoping to chase the emus down. This also proved to be a failure. The ride was so bumpy on the rough farmland that the gunner couldn't aim properly, and the emus could easily outrun the vehicle. Not a single bird was hit during this mobile assault. The operation was becoming a farce. After nearly a week of fruitless effort and considerable public ridicule, having used over 2,500 rounds of ammunition for minimal results, Major Meredith's small force was recalled by the Minister of Defense. On the 8th of November, the first round of the Great Emu War was over. The emus had won. But the farmers' problems had not gone away. The emus, emboldened by their victory, continued their raids. The farmers again pleaded for military assistance. Despite the previous failure and the negative press, the government, under pressure, agreed to a second attempt. On the 13th of November, Major Meredith and his men were sent back into the field. This time, they were more experienced and, perhaps, a little more humble. They learned from their previous mistakes and achieved slightly better results. Instead of trying to ambush large flocks, they focused on smaller groups and engaged them at closer ranges. Over the next month, they had more success, reporting nearly 1,000 emus killed. However, the cost was still immense. It took nearly 10,000 rounds of ammunition to achieve this number, meaning it took, on average, 10 bullets to kill one emu. The sheer number of birds meant that even this improved kill rate was barely making a dent in the total population. The heat, the flies, and the constant frustration were taking their toll on the soldiers. By mid-December, it was clear that the military operation was not a sustainable or effective solution. On the 10th of December, Major Meredith was recalled for good, and the troops were withdrawn. The Great Emu War was officially over. In the end, the government decided that direct military intervention was not the answer. Instead, they opted for a bounty system, which proved to be far more effective in the long run. Over a 6-month period in 1934, bounties were claimed on over 57,000 emus. The farmers were also provided with ammunition to defend their own properties. Eventually, the construction of stronger, more effective barrier fences in the 1950s provided a more permanent solution to the problem. The legacy of the Great Emu War is a curious one. It's a story of human overconfidence and the surprising resilience of nature. It serves as a humorous but poignant reminder that military might isn't always the solution, especially when the enemy doesn't play by the rules. Major Meredith, for his part, went on to praise the emus for their surprising military tactics and their incredible ability to withstand injury. The conflict became a footnote in Australian history, a bizarre episode that highlights the unique challenges of life in the outback. And so, as the dust settles once more on the Western Australian plains, our story comes to a close. The soldiers have gone home, the farmers have found new ways to protect their crops, and the emus continue to roam the vast landscapes of Australia, forever immortalized as the undefeated victors of their own peculiar war. Let this strange and gentle story guide you now into a deep and peaceful sleep. Let the quiet of the Australian night fill your mind, and allow yourself to drift away. Settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift back in time. Tonight, we're not visiting the grand battles or royal courts of the medieval era. Instead, we're quietly stepping into the everyday world of a medieval castle, to observe the gentle, rhythmic patterns of daily life. There are no grand pronouncements or dramatic events here, just the simple, steady pulse of a world long past. a perfect backdrop for rest. As the first light of dawn filters through the narrow arrow-slit windows, the castle slowly begins to stir. The air is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and damp stone. The first sounds are not of trumpets, but of the shuffling feet of a servant, perhaps a young kitchen boy, making his way to the great hall to stoke the embers of last night's fire. The great hall, the very heart of the castle, is cavernous and dim at this hour. Long wooden tables and benches, scrubbed clean the night before, stand in silent rows. High above, the soot-stained rafters disappear into the gloom. The kitchen boy works quietly, his only company the occasional scuttling of a mouse. He carefully adds kindling and then larger logs, coaxing a flame back to life. This fire is crucial. It will provide warmth and be the source for all other fires in the castle's kitchens. Soon, others join him. Cooks and their assistants arrive, their voices low, as they begin the day's first major task, preparing breakfast. This isn't a lavish feast. For most of the castle's inhabitants, the morning meal is simple. It's often a piece of dark, dense bread, maybe yesterday's, washed down with a tankard of small ale. Small ale was a low-alcohol brew, safer to drink than the often contaminated water. The lord and lady of the castle might enjoy a slightly better fare, perhaps with some cheese or a piece of preserved meat, but even for them, breakfast is a practical, unfussy affair. The kitchen is a hive of activity, but it's a practiced, methodical bustle. Cauldrons are hung over the fire, dough is kneaded for the day's bread, and vegetables are chopped. The sounds are rhythmic and repetitive. The thud of a knife on a wooden board, the clatter of pottery, the gentle hiss of the fire. As the sun climbs higher, the castle's other residents begin their day. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer starts to echo from the forge in the outer bailey. It's a steady, ringing sound that will provide a constant percussion to the day. He's not forging swords for a great battle, but more likely mending a broken hinge for a chest, or making new nails, or perhaps shoeing a horse for one of the castle's knights. His work is essential and constant. Nearby, the stable hands are mucking out the stalls, feeding and grooming the horses. The smell of hay and horse is thick in the air. Their movements are slow and deliberate, a routine honed by endless repetition. Inside the castle keep, the lady of the household oversees her domestic staff. Her day is not one of leisure, but of management. She checks the inventories of the larder, ensuring there are enough salted meats, dried fish, flour, and wine to last. She might spend hours with her ladies in waiting, not just gossiping, but engaged in needlework. They mend tunics, embroider tapestries, and spin thread. This work is not merely a pastime, it is a vital part of the castle's economy. Textiles are valuable, and creating them is a painstaking, time-consuming process. The quiet hum of the spinning wheels and the soft chatter of the women filled the solar, the private living quarters of the lord's family. The children of the castle have their own routines. The sons of the lord are likely with a tutor or a knight, learning their letters, basic arithmetic, and the fundamentals of warfare. They practice with wooden swords in the courtyard, their shouts and laughter a light counterpoint to the more serious work happening around them. The daughters learn from their mother, mastering the skills they will need to run their own households one day. For the children of the servants, their education is a more practical one. They learn by watching and helping their parents, fetching water, feeding chickens, and running errands. Throughout the day, the sentries on the castle walls keep a lonely vigil. Their job is one of long stretches of quiet observation. They walk the battlements, their footsteps echoing on the stone walkways. They watch the surrounding fields, the winding road, and the distant forest. Most days, there is nothing to report. They watch a farmer guiding his plow, a merchant's cart trundling towards the gate, a flock of birds taking flight. Their life is one of patience, punctuated by the changing of the guard. The wind is their constant companion, whistling through the merlins and crenellations of the stone wall. The main meal of the day is served around mid-morning. Everyone, from the lord to the lowest servant, gathers in the great hall. It is a communal event, but a strictly hierarchical one. The lord and his family sit at the high table, on a raised dais. The most important guests sit with them. Below, at the long trestle tables, sit the knights, the clerks, the men, and the household servants, all seated according to their rank. The food is brought out in courses. A typical meal might consist of a potager, thick stew of grains and vegetables, followed by roasted meat or fish, and more bread. The clatter of knives and the murmur of conversation fill the hall. But it's a functional event, designed to refuel the castle's population for the afternoon's work. After the meal, the day's work resumes. The laundresses are down by the river or a well, pounding clothes against rocks, a physically demanding and endless task. The castle's chaplain might be found in a small chapel, a quiet, sacred space. He says his daily prayers, but also serves as the castle's scribe, painstakingly copying documents with a quill pen and ink he has made himself. His work is slow, precise, and solitary. In the gardens within the castle walls, a gardener tends to the herbs and vegetables. These are not ornamental gardens, but practical plots, growing medicinal herbs, seasonings for the kitchen, and vegetables to supplement the castle's diet. The work is gentle weeding, watering, and harvesting, following the rhythms of the seasons. As the afternoon sun begins to wane, the pace of life slows. The blacksmith's hammer falls silent. The stable hands bring the horses in for the night. In the kitchen, preparations begin for the evening meal, which is usually a lighter affair than the midday dinner, often leftovers, or just more bread and ale. The great hall is filled once more, but the atmosphere is more subdued. The day's work is done. As darkness falls, the castle is lit by the flickering, uncertain light of tallow candles and rushlights. These give off a smoky, greasy light, casting long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. It's a dim, mysterious world, very different from our own brightly lit one. After the evening meal, there is little formal entertainment. A traveling minstrel might occasionally appear, to sing songs or tell stories in exchange for a meal and a place to sleep. But more often, the evenings are quiet. People might play a game of chess or dice, or simply talk. For most, the end of the day means preparing for sleep. The servants unroll their simple straw mattresses on the floor of the great hall, or in whatever corner they can find. The lord and lady retire to their private chamber, to their large bed, with its heavy curtains documentos, to keep out the drafts. The castle gates are barred for the night. The final sentries take up their posts on the walls, their silhouettes dark against the starry sky. The fires are banked, casting a low, red glow in the hearths. A deep quiet descends, broken only by the hoot of an owl, the sigh of the wind, or the distant barking of a dog. The castle is asleep, its many lives paused, resting and replenishing for another day, almost exactly the same as the one that just ended. This is a world governed by the sun and the seasons, a life of routine, of simple tasks repeated day after day, year after year, a slow, steady, and predictable existence. And in that predictability, there is a deep and profound peace. Let that sense of peace wash over you now, as you, too, prepare for rest. We're going to gently drift back in time, to a period often shrouded in mystery and misconception, the so-called Dark Ages. The name itself sounds quite dramatic, doesn't it? It conjures images of endless gloom, societal collapse, and a world plunged into shadow after the fall of the mighty Roman Empire. But what was life really like for the average person during these centuries, roughly from the 5th to the 10th century? Let's settle in, get comfortable, and quietly explore the daily rhythms of a world that was not so much dark as it was simply different. First, let's address the name. The term Dark Ages was coined by later scholars who looked back and saw a decline in the grand literature, architecture, and centralized power that characterized Rome. They saw it as a dark gap between two brilliant lights, the classical world and the Renaissance. But for the people living through it, it wasn't an age of darkness. It was just life. Their world was smaller, more local, but it was filled with its own routines, challenges, and joys. So, imagine you're a person living somewhere in Western Europe around the year 800. What does your day look like? Well, for over 90% of the population, your life is tied to the land. You are a farmer, a peasant. Your day doesn't start with an alarm clock, but with the sun. The crow of the rooster is your signal to rise. Your world is governed by the seasons, not by the clock. The concepts of minutes and seconds as we know them are entirely alien. Time is measured in a more natural, cyclical way. Sunrise, midday, sunset, planting season, harvest season, and a long, quiet winter. Your home is a simple structure, probably made of wood, waterlandoba, lattice of sticks covered in a mix of clay, soil, and strand topped with a thatched roof. It's likely a single room, which you share with your entire family. Privacy is a foreign concept. At the center of the room is a hearth, a fire pit that is the heart of the home. It provides warmth against the damp chill, light in the evenings, and a place to cook your meals. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, which stings the eyes but is a constant, comforting presence. There are no glass windows, just small openings with wooden shutters to keep out the wind and rain. Animals, like chickens or perhaps even a calf in the coldest months, might share a part of your dwelling, their warmth adding to the household's own. Your diet is simple and repetitive, dictated entirely by what you can grow or find. The cornerstone of every meal is bread, not the soft, fluffy loaf you might buy today, but a heavy, coarse, dark bread, made from grains like rye, barley, or oats. Wheat bread is a luxury reserved for the lord of the manor. Accompanying the bread is a thick stew or pottage, simmering over the hearth all day. Into this pot goes whatever is available: beans, peas, root vegetables like turnips and carrots, and perhaps some herbs from a small garden patch. Meat is a rare treat, usually only eaten on special feast days. You might have some pork from a pig you've raised, or perhaps some chicken. But for the most part, your protein comes from cheese, eggs, and legumes. You drink water, of course, but also a lot of what was called small beer or ale. It was low in alcohol and safer to drink than water from many streams, as the brewing process killed off harmful bacteria. Your work is hard, physical labor. From dawn till dusk, you are in the fields. The land you work doesn't belong to you. It belongs to a local lord. You are part of a system we now call manorialism. You work the lord's fields for a set number of days each week, and in return, you get a small strip of land to farm for your own family. The tools you use are basic: a heavy wooden plow, perhaps tipped with iron if you're fortunate, pulled by a team of oxen. You use sickles to harvest grain, and scythes to mow hay. Every member of the family has a role. Men do the heavy plowing and fieldwork. Women tend the garden, milk the cows, spin wool into thread, weave cloth, bake the bread, and raise the children. Even young children are expected to help, scaring birds from the crops or gathering firewood. Life is incredibly local. Your entire world might only be a few square miles around your village. You might be born, live your entire life, and be buried in the same parish without ever traveling more than 10 or 20 miles from home. The village is your community. You know everyone, and everyone knows you. There is a strong sense of mutual reliance. Neighbors help each other during the harvest, and the community comes together for celebrations and in times of hardship. The center of this community life, besides the fields, is the church. The church bell marks the hours of the day for prayer and is the only clock the village has. Christianity provides the framework for your understanding of the world. It explains the changing seasons, the mysteries of life and death, and your place in the universe. The year is marked by a cycle of religious festivals: Christmas, Easter, and the various saints' days. These feast days are welcome breaks from the endless toil. They are times for celebration, for slightly better food, for music, dancing, and community gatherings. The parish priest is a powerful figure in the village. He is likely one of the few literate people you know, and he is your connection to God and the wider world of faith. What about education and knowledge? For the vast majority, there is none in the formal sense. You learn the skills you need to survive from your parents and elders. Reading and writing are skills for monks, priests, and the nobility. But this doesn't mean people were ignorant. They possessed a deep, practical knowledge of the natural world of plants, animals, and the weather. They passed down stories, songs, and folklore orally, from one generation to the next. These tales entertained, taught moral lessons, and preserved the history of their people. While the peasant's life was one of routine, what about the nobles and knights? Their lives were certainly different. They lived in larger stone or timber halls, which would eventually evolve into the castles we imagine. Their diet was richer, with more meat and wine. Their primary occupation was not farming, but warfare and governance. A lord's day might be spent managing his estate, settling disputes among his people, practicing with weapons, or hunting. Hunting was both a sport and a way to supplement the food supply, with venison and wild boar. And then there were the monks and nuns, living in monasteries and convents. These were the true centers of learning and preservation during this era. While the outside world was fragmented and localized, monasteries were part of a vast, international network. Monks spent their days in a structured cycle of prayer, work, and study. The work part was often copying manuscripts. In the scriptorium, a dedicated room for writing, monks would painstakingly copy texts by hand: the Bible, the writings of church fathers, and even some classical Roman texts. Without them, much of the knowledge of the ancient world would have been lost forever. They were the librarians, the scholars, and the artists of the age. So, when we pull back the curtain on the Dark Ages, we find not a void, but a world teeming with life. It was a life of hardship, certainly. Disease was common, life expectancy was short, and the world was filled with dangers, both real and imagined. But it was also a world of deep community bonds, of profound faith, and of a close, cyclical connection to the natural world. It was a time of quiet continuity, where the small, everyday actions of millions of people laid the foundation for the world that was to come. It wasn't an age of darkness, but an age of dawn, a long, slow sunrise that would eventually lead to the high Middle Ages and beyond. And now, as you close your eyes, perhaps you can hear the faint echo of a distant church bell, the lowing of oxen in a field, and the soft crackle of a fire in a humble cottage. Rest well. Ever wondered what a real samurai's day was like? Forget what you've seen in the movies. The life of a samurai wasn't just endless epic battles. It was a disciplined, ritualistic existence, governed by a strict code of honor. Today, we were going to step back in time to feudal Japan and spend 24 hours in the sandals of a samurai. Let's uncover the reality behind the legend. Our samurai's day begins long before the sun even thinks about rising. The pre-dawn chill fills the air as he wakes, not to an alarm, but to an inner clock honed by years of discipline. The very first act is one of mindfulness. He performs a simple purification ritual, splashing cold water on his face to awaken both body and spirit. This isn't just about getting clean. It's about mentally preparing for the day, centering himself before the world stirs. After this, he might tend to his small garden. This simple meditative task of nurturing plants connects him to the natural world and the cycle of life and death. A constant theme in a samurai's philosophy. It's a moment of peace, a stark contrast to the potential chaos of his duties. Next comes breakfast. It's a simple, nutritious meal, perhaps some rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables. Nothing heavy. A samurai's diet was designed for lean strength and endurance, not indulgence. Every bite is eaten with intention and gratitude. With his body fueled, the morning is dedicated to what truly defines him. Training. The dojo is his sanctuary. The day's training might start with saburi, the practice of thousands of sword swings. Each cut through the air is precise, powerful, and meditative. It's not just muscle memory. It's about unifying mind, body, and sword until they move as one. The hiss of the blade is the only sound, a testament to his focus. But a samurai was much more than just a swordsman. Depending on the day, his training could include kudo, the art of archery, where the goal is not just hitting the target, but achieving a state of perfect self-control. Or perhaps yabasami, the incredibly difficult skill of shooting a bow and arrow from horseback. He would also practice jujitsu, the art of unarmed combat, because a warrior must be formidable even without his blade. This relentless training wasn't just for battle. It was a path to self-mastery. After hours of intense physical exertion, the afternoon offers a change of pace. This is when the samurai would attend to his duties. If he served a daimyo, a powerful feudal lord, he might act as a bodyguard, an administrator, or a magistrate. This could involve patrolling the castle grounds, overseeing tax collection, or even settling disputes among commoners. These tasks required a sharp mind, diplomacy, and an unwavering sense of justice, all guided by the code of Bushido. This wasn't just a job, it was his identity. His loyalty to his lord was absolute, a sacred bond that superseded everything else, even his own life. A samurai's honor was tied directly to how well he served his master and his domain. But a samurai's education didn't stop at the martial arts. The concept of bunbu ryodo, or the pen and the sword in accord, was crucial. A true warrior was expected to be as skilled in culture and arts as he was in combat. So, the afternoon might be spent in quieter pursuits. He would practice shado, the art of calligraphy. The brush strokes were a reflection of his inner state, calm, deliberate, and strong. Each character was an exercise in precision and focus, much like a sword cut. He might also compose poetry, like haiku, capturing fleeting moments of beauty or profound philosophical thoughts. Or perhaps he studied classic literature and military strategy from texts like Sun Tzu's The Art of War. This balance of warrior and scholar was the ideal. It prevented the warrior from becoming a mindless brute, and the scholar from becoming an ineffective weakling. As evening approaches, the samurai returns home. This is a time for family. While historical roles were very defined, he would spend this time with his wife and children. He might oversee his children's education, passing down the values of honor, discipline, and respect that defined their class. Family was the bedrock of his legacy. Dinner is another simple, deliberate meal. It's a time for quiet reflection, sharing the day's experiences. Following dinner, there's another important ritual, the care of his weapons. His swords, the katana, and wakizashi, were considered his soul. He would meticulously clean and oil the blades, inspect the fittings, and treat them with the utmost reverence. A well-maintained sword was a reflection of a well-maintained spirit. This nightly ritual wasn't a chore. It was a conversation with his honor. Before bed, the samurai might engage in a final period of quiet reflection or meditation. He would review his actions of the day, measuring them against the virtues of Bushido: justice, courage, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty. Did he act with integrity? Did he show compassion? Was he loyal to his lord? This self-examination was vital for his spiritual growth. It was a way to ensure he was constantly striving to be a better warrior and a better man. Finally, he would retire for the night, his mind clear and his spirit at peace, ready to rise before dawn and do it all again. The life of a samurai was a delicate, demanding balance. It was a constant dance between violence and art, duty and personal growth, the sword and the brush. It was a life of purpose, discipline, and a relentless pursuit of perfection, where every single action, from drinking tea to drawing a sword, was performed with intention and mindfulness. It was so much more than just fighting. It was a way of life. Settle in, get comfortable, and allow your mind to drift as we journey back in time together. Tonight, we're not seeking excitement or adventure. Instead, we're looking for a calm, quiet path into history, a gentle story to guide you toward a peaceful rest. So, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and let the outside world fade away. Our story begins in ancient Greece, around 360 BC, with the philosopher Plato. In two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, he introduced the world to a legendary island, a powerful and advanced kingdom called Atlantis. According to Plato, this island existed some 9,000 years before his time, situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we now know as the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato described Atlantis as a marvel of engineering and natural beauty. It was an island larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, organized in concentric rings of land and water. The soil was rich, the resources were abundant, and the people were noble and virtuous. They built magnificent temples, harbors, and palaces, adorned with precious metals like gold, silver, and a mysterious, glittering metal called orichalcum. The capital city itself was a wonder. A grand canal, 50 stadia long, connected the outermost ring of water to the sea. The rings of land were joined by bridges, with tunnels large enough for ships to pass through. At the very center, on a small island, stood the royal palace and a sacred temple dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea, who was said to be the progenitor of the Atlantean kings. For many generations, the Atlanteans lived in harmony and prosperity. They were a peaceful people, governed by laws of virtue and wisdom. They valued goodness above all else, holding their vast wealth and power with a light and graceful hand. But as generations passed, Plato tells us, their divine nature began to weaken, diluted by mortal traits. Greed and ambition started to creep into their hearts. They sought to expand their empire, launching an aggressive campaign to conquer lands around the Mediterranean. They successfully subdued parts of Libya and Europe, reaching as far as Italy. However, when they attempted to enslave Athens, they met their match. The ancient Athenians, embodying the ideal state Plato so admired, led a coalition of Greek states and bravely fought back, ultimately defeating the mighty Atlantean army and liberating the conquered peoples. But the story of Atlantis doesn't end with a simple military defeat. Shortly after their failed invasion, a terrible fate befell the island. Plato writes of a single, dreadful day and night of misfortune. Violent earthquakes and catastrophic floods shook the land. And then, the entire island of Atlantis, with all its splendor and its people, sank into the depths of the sea, disappearing forever, without a trace. And so, the tale of Atlantis was born. A story of a utopian society, its moral decay, and its ultimate demise. For centuries, people have debated whether Plato intended this as a true historical account, or as a philosophical allegory. A cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and imperial ambition. Was he using Atlantis to illustrate his ideas about an ideal state versus a corrupt one? Or was he recording a genuine, forgotten chapter of human history, passed down through generations? The question has captivated thinkers, historians, and dreamers ever since. Many have embarked on quests to find the lost city portrayed by Plato's descriptions. The search has spanned the globe, from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean, from the Atlantic Ocean to Antarctica. One of the most popular theories links Atlantis to the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete and the nearby island of Thera, now known as Santorini. Around 1600 BC, a massive volcanic eruption occurred on Thera. It was one of the largest volcanic events in recorded history, an explosion so powerful it collapsed the center of the island, creating a huge, water-filled caldera. The eruption would have triggered immense tsunamis, devastating the coastal areas of Crete, the heart of the Minoan civilization. The Minoans were an advanced Bronze Age culture known for their beautiful palaces, vibrant art, and extensive maritime trade. The sudden and catastrophic destruction caused by the Thera eruption aligns in some ways with Plato's account of Atlantis' swift disappearance. Perhaps, the theory goes, the memory of this real historical disaster was passed down through generations, embellished and transformed over 1,000 years until it reached Plato, who then crafted it into his narrative. Others have looked elsewhere. Some have suggested that the Bahamas banks, with its submerged stone formations, like the Bimini Road, could be remnants of the lost city. This underwater structure of rectangular limestone blocks looks almost man-made, fueling speculation that it might be a wall or road from an ancient civilization. However, geologists generally agree that these formations are natural beach rock, a result of geological processes. The search has also ventured into Spain, near the Donana National Park. Researchers using satellite imagery have identified what appear to be submerged circular structures in the marshlands, matching Plato's description of the concentric rings of the Atlantean capital. The theory is that a great tsunami could have wiped out a city in this location, leaving it buried under layers of mud and silt. Archaeological investigations in the area are ongoing, but so far, no definitive proof has been found. Other, more speculative locations have been proposed over the years, placing Atlantis in Ireland, the North Sea, or even South America. Each theory attempts to reconcile Plato's text with geographical and archaeological evidence, but none has been universally accepted. Atlantis remains stubbornly lost, a tantalizing mystery just beyond the reach of our modern world. The enduring appeal of Atlantis lies not just in the search for a physical place, but in what it represents. It's a symbol of a lost golden age, a perfect society that vanished from the world. It speaks to a deep human longing for a past that was grander, wiser, and more harmonious than our own present. It's a story of paradise lost, a reminder of the fragility of even the greatest civilizations. Whether Atlantis was a real place or a product of Plato's brilliant imagination, its legacy is undeniable. It has inspired countless books, films, and works of art, becoming a permanent fixture in our collective consciousness. The story continues to fuel our curiosity about the unknown depths of the ocean and the forgotten corners of history. And as we ponder this ancient enigma, let your own mind drift into the quiet depths. Imagine the calm, deep ocean, where secrets lie sleeping. Let the gentle rhythm of the waves soothe you. There is nothing more to do, nothing to figure out. Just allow the story to fade, like an echo from a distant time. The mysteries of the past can wait. For now, there is only this moment of peace, this gentle descent into a deep and restful sleep. Sleep well. Tonight, we drift back in time, to the quiet, fog-shrouded streets of Victorian England. We're not here for high drama or thrilling tales, but for the calm, methodical world of a profession often overlooked, the undertaker. Let your mind settle as we explore the enigmatic lives of these solemn figures. In an era defined by progress and industry, the Victorians also cultivated a profound and intricate relationship with death. It was a visible, almost constant presence in daily life, and at the heart of its rituals stood the undertaker. Their role was far more than just a business. It was a craft, a public service, and a performance, all rolled into one. Imagine a typical Victorian town. The clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones, the murmur of the marketplace, and somewhere, a quiet storefront with a discreet, polished sign. This was the undertaker's domain. The journey into this profession often began with an apprenticeship. A young person, perhaps from a family of craftsmen, like cabinet makers or drapers, would learn the trade from a master. This wasn't a glamorous path, but it offered stability. The apprentice would start with the basics, polishing coffins, caring for the horses that drew the hearse, and running errands. They learned the importance of decorum, of a hushed tone, and a respectful demeanor. Every detail mattered. The quality of the wood for the coffin, the deep black of the mourning drapes, the silent efficiency of their movements all were part of the service. As their skills grew, they would learn the more delicate aspects of the trade. This included preparing the deceased for their final viewing, a crucial part of the Victorian mourning process. This was done with immense care and respect, using simple, natural techniques. The goal was to present a peaceful, serene image for the grieving family, offering them a final moment of quiet farewell. It was a somber, but necessary task that required a steady hand and a compassionate heart. The undertaker was also a master of logistics. They navigated a complex web of social customs and etiquette, the type of funeral, the number of horses pulling the hearse, the material of the coffin fittings. All of these were signals of the deceased's social standing. A wealthy family might demand an elaborate procession with plumed horses and professional mourners, known as mutes, who stood silently at the doorway. A poorer family's funeral would be far simpler, but no less significant. The undertaker had to be a discreet advisor, guiding the family through these choices without adding to their distress. Let's consider the tools of the trade. The workshop would be filled with the scent of sawdust and polish. Stacks of seasoned timber oak, elm, or pine would be waiting to be crafted into coffins. The designs ranged from simple, plain boxes to ornate caskets with polished brass handles and engraved nameplates. The undertaker, or the carpenters they employed, took pride in their craftsmanship. Each coffin was a final, respectful vessel. Then there was the hearse itself. These were often beautiful, if somber, vehicles. Carved wood, gleaming black paint, and large glass panels created an impression of solemn dignity. Maintaining the hearse and the horses was a significant part of the business. The horses, usually large black Frisians, were chosen for their calm temperament and majestic appearance. They were groomed to perfection, their harnesses polished until they shone. The slow, measured pace of the funeral procession was a public spectacle, a final tribute moving through the streets. The clothing of the undertaker and their staff was just as important. They were men in black, long before it was a movie title. Top hats, frock coats, and gloves, all in the deepest shade of black, were their uniform. This wasn't just about fashion. It was a visual cue, a symbol of their role as guides through the rituals of grief. Their appearance communicated respect, solemnity, and professionalism to the entire community. Beyond the practicalities, the Victorian undertaker was a repository of local knowledge. They knew families, their histories, and their connections. They were present at life's final chapter, and as such, were keepers of countless quiet stories. They saw the raw reality of life and loss, from the passing of a prominent citizen to the tragic loss of a child. This position required a unique blend of practicality and empathy. They had to be business-minded to survive, but also possess a deep well of human understanding. Think about the atmosphere of their establishment. It would be quiet, orderly, and impeccably clean. There might be a small, private room where families could make arrangements. The furniture would be solid and respectable. Everything was designed to create an environment of calm and reassurance during a time of chaos and pain. The undertaker's quiet confidence and methodical approach could be a source of immense comfort to a grieving family. Now, let's drift to another corner of the Victorian world, to the quiet and meticulous process of bookbinding. Imagine a dusty workshop, sunlight filtering through a tall window, illuminating floating dust motes. The air smells of old paper, leather, and glue. A bookbinder sits at a large wooden bench, surrounded by tools, bone folders, presses, hammers, and knives. Their work is a slow, deliberate art. The process begins with the printed pages, delivered in large, flat sheets. The bookbinder's first task is to fold them, precisely and carefully, creating the gatherings, or signatures, that will form the book. Each fold must be exact, each crease sharp. Then, these signatures are collated in the correct order. A single mistake here would render the entire book unreadable. It's a task that requires focus and patience. Next, the signatures are sewn together. Using a sewing frame, the binder passes a needle and strong linen thread through the folds of each signature, linking them together to form the book block. The rhythm of the sewing is steady and practiced. It's a quiet, repetitive motion, the gentle pull of the thread creating a strong, flexible spine. This foundation is crucial for the book's longevity. A well-sewn book could last for centuries. Once the book block is secure, the edges are trimmed. In a large press, called a guillotine, a heavy blade slices through the paper, creating smooth, clean edges. Sometimes, these edges would then be decorated. Gilt edging, where a thin layer of gold leaf is applied, was a popular choice for finer books. This involved coating the edge with a special adhesive, applying the delicate gold leaf, and then burnishing it to a brilliant shine with a smooth agate stone. Now, the book is ready for its cover, or its binding. The boards, typically made of thick card or millboard, are cut to size. The covering material, perhaps rich leather, durable bookcloth, or decorative marbled paper, is carefully prepared. If it's a leather binding, the leather is pared down at the edges to make it thin and flexible for turning in. The cover is then attached to the book block. This is one of the most skilled parts of the process. The spine of the book might be rounded with a hammer, and backing shoulders created to allow the boards to hinge open smoothly. The cover material is glued and carefully fitted around the boards and the spine. The corners are neatly tucked, and the edges are turned over the inside of the boards. Every surface must be smooth, every corner perfectly formed. The final touches are what truly bring the book to life. This is the art of finishing. Using heated brass tools and gold leaf, the finisher would impress titles and decorative patterns onto the cover and spine. Each letter of the title is picked up individually with a hot tool, pressed onto the gold leaf, and then onto the leather. Intricate patterns, or tooling, could be built up line by line, flower by flower. This required an artist's eye and a surgeon's steady hand. Let us return now to the quiet, dignified world of the Victorian undertaker, as night falls over the city. Their work is done for the day. The workshop is silent. The horses are resting in their stable, and the black crepe has been put away. In this quiet, we find a sense of peace. The world continues its bustling pace. But here, in these spaces dedicated to finality and remembrance, there is a profound stillness. The undertaker's life was one of routine, ritual, and profound responsibility. It was a life lived in the shadows of society's great events, a steady hand in times of turmoil. As you drift deeper into sleep, let the gentle, methodical rhythm of these forgotten trades be your guide. The careful folding of paper, the steady stitching of a book, the slow procession of a hearse, the quiet polishing of wood. These are the sounds of a world at peace, of tasks done with care and purpose. Let this sense of order and calm wash over you, carrying you gently into a deep and restful sleep. Good night. We're going to gently drift back in time, all the way to the Fertile Crescent, to ancient Mesopotamia. So, find a comfortable position, close your eyes, and let your mind wander to a land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. There's no need to focus too intently. Just let the story wash over you, like the gentle flow of those ancient waters. This is the cradle of civilization, where some of the world's first cities began to rise from the earth. Imagine the sun rising over a vast, flat landscape, casting a warm, golden glow on fields of wheat and barley. The air is still cool from the night, carrying the scent of damp earth and baking bread. The rhythm of life here is dictated by the seasons and the rivers. For most people in Mesopotamia, life revolved around agriculture. Let's picture a farming family just beginning their day. Their home is a simple structure made of sun-dried mud bricks. The walls are thick, keeping the inside cool during the day and warm at night. Inside, the main room is sparse, with reed mats on the floor for sleeping and a small hearth for cooking. There isn't much furniture, maybe a low table and a few clay pots for storing water and grain. As the sun climbs higher, the farmer heads out to the fields. He might be carrying a simple wooden plow, perhaps pulled by a pair of oxen. The work is hard and repetitive. He walks back and forth, turning over the dark, rich soil, preparing it for the seeds. The irrigation canals, a marvel of Mesopotamian engineering, need constant attention. He might spend part of his day clearing a small channel of silt, ensuring the precious water from the river can reach his crops. There's a quiet, steady rhythm to this work, a cycle that has been repeated for generations. Back at the house, his wife is busy with her own tasks. She might start by grinding grain. Using a large, flat stone and a smaller handstone, she grinds the wheat or barley into flour. It's a slow, methodical process. The rhythmic scraping of stone against stone, a familiar sound in every household. With the flour, she makes flatbread, baking it on a hot clay surface or against the inner wall of a small, dome-shaped oven called a tanner. The smell of fresh bread fills the small courtyard. She also has to fetch water from the local well or canal, carrying it in heavy clay jars balanced on her head or shoulder. She might weave cloth from wool or flax, the spindle turning steadily in her hands, transforming raw fibers into thread. These tasks are endless, but they provide the essential fabric of daily life, ensuring the family is fed, clothed, and sheltered. Children in Mesopotamia had chores from a young age. A young boy might follow his father to the fields, learning how to manage the oxen or clear the canals. A young girl would help her mother with grinding grain, fetching water, or looking after younger siblings. For a few, usually boys from wealthier families, there was the option of school, known as the Ediba, or tablet house. Let's imagine one of these schools. The students sit on clay benches in a small courtyard, each holding a lump of wet clay. The teacher, a scribe, dictates a line from a text. The students use a reed stylus to press wedge-shaped marks, cuneiform, into their clay tablets. The work is difficult. They start by learning how to make a perfect wedge, then move on to thousands of signs. They copy lists of words, names of gods, types of trees, professions, and legal phrases. It's rote memorization, hour after hour. If a student makes a mistake, His tablet is simply smoothed over, and he starts again. The sun beats down, and the only sound is the scratching of styluses and the low murmur of the teacher's voice. Now, let's drift away from the farm and the school, and wander into one of the bustling cities, like Ur or Babylon. The city is a maze of narrow, winding streets. The houses are packed closely together, their mud brick walls creating a labyrinth of alleyways. There's no grand city planning here. It grew organically over centuries. As you walk, you hear the constant hum of activity. You might pass a potter's workshop, the wheels spinning rhythmically as the potter's skilled hands shape a lump of clay into a graceful pot. Next door, a metalsmith hammers bronze into a tool or a weapon, the sharp, ringing sound echoing down the street. The air is thick with the smoke from countless cooking fires and kilns. Let's find our way to the marketplace, the heart of the city. It's a vibrant, crowded space. Farmers have brought their surplus grain, vegetables, and dates to trade. Fishermen display their catch from the river. Shepherds have brought wool and live animals. There is no coin money yet. Instead, everything is done through barter. A bag of barley might be traded for a clay pot. A bolt of woven cloth might be exchanged for a basket of figs. For larger transactions, silver was used, weighed carefully on a balanced scale. The negotiations are quiet, but intense. A dance of offers and counter-offers that has been practiced for centuries. At the center of the city, dominating the skyline, stands the ziggurat. This is a massive, stepped pyramid made of mud bricks, with a temple at its very top. It's the home of the city's patron god, or goddess. Only priests and priestesses are allowed to ascend to the top. For the average person, it is a constant, looming reminder of the power of the gods and the king who serves them. Religious life is deeply woven into the fabric of society. People make small offerings at local shrines, say prayers to ward off evil spirits, and consult diviners to understand the will of the gods. They believed the gods controlled everything: the harvest, the flooding of the rivers, health, and sickness. Let's think about the law. The famous Code of Hammurabi gives us a detailed glimpse. Justice was often harsh, an eye for an eye. But it also established principles we recognize today. It set prices for services, established rules for contracts, and tried to protect the weak from the powerful. If you had a dispute with a neighbor over a water channel, you would go before a panel of local elders or a royal judge. They would hear testimony, examine evidence, and make a ruling based on custom and written law. Life was ordered and structured. As evening approaches, the city begins to quiet down. The market's empty, the workshops close. Families gather in their homes or courtyards for the evening meal. It might consist of bread, a simple stew of lentils and onions, some dates, and perhaps some beer. Mesopotamian beer was thick, like a porridge, and was a staple of their diet, drunk through a straw to filter out the solids. As darkness falls, the stars emerge in the night sky. With no city lights to obscure the view, the stars are incredibly bright. Mesopotamian astronomers were also astrologers. They meticulously tracked the movements of the planets and stars, believing they were messages from the gods, foretelling events on Earth. They created star charts and could predict eclipses. They saw patterns in the heavens and believed those same patterns were reflected in life below. A family might sit on their flat roof to catch the cool night breeze. They might tell stories, myths of gods and heroes, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale of a king's quest for immortality. These stories were their entertainment, their history, and their moral compass, passed down through generations. The sounds of the night are different from the day. The hum of the city gives way to the chirping of crickets, the distant barking of a dog, the soft whisper of the wind through the reed beds along the river. The city sleeps under a blanket of stars, resting before another day of labor, of trade, of life between the two rivers. The life of an ancient Mesopotamian was one of hard work and simple routines, governed by the sun, the seasons, and the water. It was a life of community, of family, of deep-seated belief in a world filled with powerful gods. It was a life of building, of creating, of laying the very foundations for the world we live in today. And now, there is nothing more to do. The fields are quiet. The markets are empty. The scribes have put down their styluses. The ziggurat stands silent against the starry sky. Let your thoughts drift away, like a clay tablet smoothed over, ready for a fresh start. Allow yourself to sink deeper into comfort and rest. Good night.